I work as a junior safety officer on a mid-sized cruise ship, the Pacific Jewel. My job is simple: watch the cameras, note anything strange, and alert the senior team. On our fourth night at sea, we hosted a big pool deck party. Loud music, neon bracelets, fruity drinks. More than 800 passengers crowded around the lit-up water. Even from the control room, I could feel the bass thumping through the floor. Around 11 p.m., a bartender radioed that a guest named Tyler Marsh hadn't come back for the tab he'd started. His friends said he'd been hammered and wandering along the rail, so the crew feared he'd toppled overboard. That is every officer's nightmare, and protocol says we start a head count and freeze the ship's course. But you never trigger that unless you're sure, because turning a vessel this big costs time and safety. I began scrolling through camera feeds to confirm Tyler's last known location. Footage showed him at 10:42 p.m., dancing by the shallow end, shirt off, flip-flops dangling from 2 fingers. At 10:48, he leaned on the starboard rail, drink balanced on the metal. Rain from a passing cloud burst speckled the lens, but I could still see him. A friend shouted, "Bro, you good?" Tyler lifted the drink in salute. That was the last clear frame. The bridge grew tense. The staff captain asked over comms, "Did you get a badge swipe?" Every cabin door and most restricted doors read key cards. I pulled the access logs. Tyler's cabin was last opened at 8:17 p.m. But something else startled me. A swipe at 11:03 p.m. on Deck 2 engineering access, a place tourists never go, crew only. Tyler's card ID opened the heavy door that leads to the waste processing corridor. That made no sense. Deck 2 sat 4 levels below the pool. If Tyler had fallen, he'd be in the ocean, not walking into a locked service hall 15 minutes later. The captain ordered me to pull the matching camera clip. I clicked the file. The video screen filled with gray static, like an old television with no signal. The timestamp matched 11:02 to 11:07. Every other camera worked fine. Only that angle glitched, perfectly covering the window when the door opened. We decided not to trigger a man overboard alert yet. Instead, security officers Ortega and Bell took the elevator down to Deck 2. I stayed on comms, switching views as they walked the empty metal corridor. Pipes sweated condensation on both sides. The air down there always smells of diesel and disinfectant. The officers reached the door. It was closed but not latched. Bell pushed it with one gloved hand, and the hinge creaked open. Inside lay a narrow utility space. Gray walls, low ceiling, fluorescent bulbs. Broken glass glimmered on the floor, probably a dropped bottle. Further in, behind a row of trash compactors, Ortega found a beach towel bunched into a ball. The towel had the ship's logo. He spread it with his boot. Dark blotches soaked the center. The radio crackled. "It's blood." Bell scanned the cubicles with his flashlight. No sign of Tyler, but against the far wall, he spotted a maintenance locker forced open. Its keypad was smashed in, wires hanging. Someone with strength, or a tool, had ripped it apart. Missing were 2 coveralls and a pair of bolt cutters. The officers backed out and sealed the area. We now had a missing passenger, a blood-stained towel, stolen gear, and glitched footage. The staff captain ordered a silent lockdown, crew checkpoints on all stairwells, but no announcement to panic guests. I kept digging. Another swipe from Tyler's card appeared at 11:19 p.m., this time at a service elevator near the theater, closer to Deck 1, where cargo ramps open to the sea. I played with that camera. Again, corrupted video filled the screen for exactly 3 minutes. Either the card was cloned, or someone carried Tyler's actual pass after taking him. And whoever it was could jam cameras by unplugging them, or using some blocker we didn't know about. I felt sweat beads on my lip even in the cool control room. Midnight passed. Music on the pool deck faded, and people drifted to cabins, unaware of the hunt beneath them. A team in plain uniforms searched every engineering nook. At 12:27 a.m., Ortega radioed, "We found the card." It was on the floor of the portside cargo lounge, next to an open vent grate big enough for a man to crawl through. The vent led to the ballast tanks and eventually to a shell door barely a meter above the waterline. That door had a fresh scrape near the latch, as if pried open. I pictured it. Someone drags a drunk passenger downstairs, swipes his card to look legit, wounds him, or worse, steals crew clothes, and exits straight into the night sea on a hidden service platform. But why take the body? Kidnap? Disguise an accident? The more I stared at the empty feeds, the less sense it made. At 1 a.m., we finally slowed the ship and launched a spotlight search along the wake. The captain made a calm announcement about technical issues, asking guests to remain in their cabins. Searchlights painted white arcs over black waves. Nothing floated. The Coast Guard received our report and would deploy at dawn. Morning gray rolled in. The party deck looked ordinary again, staff stacking loungers, rinsing spilled cocktails. Guests whispered about the ship stopping overnight, but the rumor said it was a drill. Only a handful knew a man was gone. We never found Tyler Marsh. Coast Guard cutters scanned 50 square miles for 2 days. Divers inspected the hull, no trace. His family flew home with his luggage sealed. The official record lists him as presumed fallen overboard while intoxicated. Back in the control room, I saved 2 souvenirs: a screenshot of the access log with those impossible swipes, and a still image from the pool camera at 10:48. If you zoom the frame just beyond Tyler's shoulder, you see a man in dark clothes, face hidden under a towel, lowering something metallic into a backpack. He isn't a guest, no wristband, no drink. He stands there for only 1 frame, then the next, he's gone, as if he sensed the lens. I keep telling myself there's a rational answer. Maybe a card reader error and coincidental static. I had dreamed about an Alaskan cruise for years, so when my sister and I finally booked one in mid-July 2017, it felt like a reward for surviving a long, hot summer back home. The ship held more than 3,000 passengers, yet by the second night, it already felt like a floating neighborhood. We memorized the quickest path from the buffet to our interior cabin on Deck 8, learned the rhythm of the theater shows, and even picked a favorite bartender. Everything seemed calm, orderly, and safe. On the 3rd night, July 25th, we watched the sunset paint the glaciers pink, then headed to a family game show in one of the lounges. I remember the host joking that we were all detectives solving fake mysteries while sailing through the real wilderness. No one knew that. Only a few decks away, a real crime was building. Around 9 p.m., we left early because my sister felt seasick. The corridor outside our room was unusually quiet, the hum of engines louder than normal conversation. From cabin E734, 2 doors down, I heard a man and woman arguing. The man's voice was low and angry. The woman's sounded shaky, like she was trying to keep things private even as it spilled into the hall. I thought about knocking, but I was a stranger, and domestic arguments usually burn out on their own. Instead, I guided my sister inside and turned the TV up. Minutes later, a heavy thump shook our wall, followed by a high, terrified scream that cut off too fast. My sister's eyes widened. Before I could react, the ship's public address system crackled. Security, medical team, cabin E734. The calm tone didn't match the panic I felt in my gut. I opened our door a crack. Passengers were peeking out of other rooms, whispering. Then a steward sprinted past, gloves already on, and banged on E734. "Ship security, open up." No answer. He swiped a master key, pushed inside, and shouted for backup. The next 30 seconds felt stretched, silent, and then a single word echoed down the corridor. "Blood!" Followed by retching noises. Security officers arrived with a medic cart, blocked the hallway, and ordered everyone back into their cabins. Through the viewer, I saw them drag a barefoot man into the hall. He wore jeans and a gray t-shirt that was almost black. Blood covered his forearms up to the elbows. He kept repeating, "She wouldn't stop laughing at me," in a flat voice, as if he were explaining a broken appliance. When one guard tried to cuff him, he jerked toward the open balcony door like he still wanted to throw something, or someone, overboard. They forced him to the deck and zip-tied his wrists. For the rest of the night, we were confined. Crew members went door to door taking witness statements. One officer told us there had been a serious incident, and a female passenger was unresponsive. No names were released, but rumors spread in whispers through the ventilation shafts. The couple was from Utah. They were celebrating an anniversary. Their children had been in the next cabin. People cried quietly behind thin walls. You go on a cruise to escape normal life, not to bump into murder at arm's length. At dawn, the captain announced we would divert to Juneau so the FBI could board. When they finally let us walk the corridor, cabin E734 was sealed with crime scene tape. A smear of dark red remained on the cream-colored carpet even after the cleaners tried bleaching it. Everyone stared, snapped photos, and hurried away like spectators at a crash site, pretending to be late for breakfast. During the rest of the voyage, I kept replaying the sounds, the dull thud, the short scream, that sentence. She wouldn't stop laughing at me. The children's cabin was now guarded, and every time I saw two teenage girls escorted to eat under watch, I felt a knot in my chest. It struck me that there is nowhere to run on a ship. You share walls, air, and lifeboats with whoever climbs aboard, saints or monsters alike. Back home, I followed the news. The man was Kenneth Manzanares, 43. The victim, his wife Christy, 39. Investigators said he struck her again and again with closed fists, shattering her skull while their daughters pounded on the locked door. Other relatives pulled him away, but he tried to drag her toward the balcony before the crew tackled him. The autopsy called it blunt force trauma. In 2021, he received 30 years in federal prison, but he died behind bars not long after. Those facts were grim, yet what haunted me more were the little things. The way the hallway carpet never quite lost the stain, the paper flyer sliding under my door that night promoting a murder mystery trivia contest scheduled for the next day, the knowledge that hundreds of us slept on, unaware, just a few meters from real terror. Cruise brochures show endless blue water and smiling families. They never mention that the ocean is also the perfect place to trap every secret human weakness. It has been 8 summers since that trip, but I still flinch at loud knocks on hotel walls. I still picture the narrow ship corridor, fluorescent lights buzzing, and a man in bloody clothes muttering the same sentence like a stuck song. When friends talk about booking cruises, I smile and change the subject. The scenery was beautiful, sure, but beauty means nothing once you learn how thin the walls are and how little time it takes for a quiet vacation night to turn into a crime scene you can never sail away from. I booked the 7-night Summer Isles cruise because I wanted noise, sunlight, and company after a hard winter working from home. I flew to Miami, rolled my small suitcase up the gangway, and let the staff scan my keycard. For the first time in months, I felt anonymous in a good way, just one more traveler among 3,000. My cabin was an inside single on deck 9, neat and bright with fake porthole lights cycling through blue sky and sunset. I unpacked, clipped my card lanyard around my neck, and hurried to the sail-away buffet before the lines grew. At the salad bar, I noticed a man already staring. He wore a plain gray t-shirt, tan cargo pants, and a baseball cap with no logo. 40, maybe younger, strong build, short beard. Nothing strange about him, except how hard he watched me spoon lettuce. When our eyes met, he smiled as if we shared a joke. I moved 3 trays down, finished quickly, and ate on the open deck, where gulls followed the ship. I told myself that hundreds of guests cross paths. Seeing one face meant nothing. That evening, the cruise director held a welcome show in the theater. Purple lights flashed, the band played 70s hits, and I chose a seat halfway back. When the host asked everyone to stand and dance, I did, laughing with strangers on either side. Turning, I spotted Gray Shirt 2 rows behind, alone, clapping off beat, gaze fixed on me again. I sat quickly, heart pushing against my ribs while the rest of the crowd kept moving. After the show, I waited until he left, then slipped out a different exit and kept close to groups on the promenade until I reached my cabin. Day 2 started with sunrise yoga on the top deck. Sea wind tugged at the mats, and the instructor's calm voice drifted through speakers. On my 3rd downward dog, I glanced toward the rail. Gray Shirt stood outside the class boundary, arms folded, cap pulled low, watching. He didn't move when I shifted positions. A bad cramp ended my session early. I rolled up my mat, walked the long way around the pool, and rode the elevator instead of the stairs. I stayed in my cabin most of the morning, door locked, lights off, listening to the low hum of engines. By dinner, I was tired of hiding. Formal night meant everyone wore something nice. I chose a navy dress and shared a table for 8. Conversation flowed. Jobs, hometowns, excursions. I began to relax until a server placed soup in front of the empty chair beside me, and Gray Shirt slid into it a moment later. He greeted no one, didn't order, and only pretended to sip from the spoon while scanning the faces. When his eyes reached me, his lips parted slightly, almost apologetic, almost pleased. My seatmates noticed the tension. One man asked, "Friend of yours?" I shook my head. Gray Shirt rose and left without finishing. My appetite vanished. Back in my cabin, I stepped onto my small private balcony to breathe. Summer air was thick, sea black except for white foam. Then I saw him again. He stood one level below, on a crew-only deck, elbows on the rail, looking straight up at me. No passenger cabins opened onto that space. We were separated by maybe 15 feet of empty air, but I rushed inside and bolted the balcony door. I walked to guest services with my hands shaking. The night supervisor listened while I explained. Same man, everywhere, no interaction, but constant staring. I described clothes, height, beard, and cap. He typed into a manifest search, frowned, tried variations of spelling, and nothing. Could be a crew member off duty, he said, though my description did not match the crew photo grid he showed me. He called security. 2 officers arrived, professional, polite. They walked me back to Deck 9, inspected the balcony door lock, and promised to check the cameras. I thanked them, convinced that it would end it. Morning 3, a voicemail flashed on my cabin phone. Security asked me to visit their office. Inside, the chief officer apologized. They reviewed every camera angle I named. No one matching Gray Shirt appeared on footage from the buffet, theater, yoga deck, dining room, or my corridor. In each clip where I remembered seeing him, the cameras showed empty space or other guests. The officer asked if I might be confusing passengers. Embarrassment burned my cheeks, but fear was stronger. "I know what I saw," I said. He promised extra patrols near my cabin. That evening, I tried to enjoy the trivia contest. Halfway through, a teammate nudged me to read a question. I lifted my eyes, and there he was in the back of the lounge, leaning against a pillar, cap brim hiding his face. I whispered my answer, left the table, and hurried toward an exit. Footsteps matched mine in the hallway, unhurried yet close. I broke into a run, rounded the corner to the nearest house phone, and punched the security extension. While the phone rang, the footsteps stopped. I looked back. The hall was empty. Security searched deck by deck, cabin by cabin, for an unregistered man. They announced nothing to guests, but I saw extra officers at stairwells, storage doors padlocked, and crew members whispering. 2 days of island excursions passed. I disembarked only on group tours, never alone. Still, I sensed him. A reflection in a shop window, a figure 3 rows back on the tender boat, a shape behind a lifeboat as we reboarded. Each time I pointed, someone else looked, nothing there. On the final night, the ship held a fireworks show off the bow. I stayed on my balcony, thinking the crowd might hide him. The sky blossomed red, green, and gold. Explosions echoed across the water. When the last sparks faded, darkness swallowed the decks until floodlights came on. In that brief black second, I heard the balcony partition behind me click open. I spun. Gray Shirt stepped through the gap from the next cabin, cap gone, beard damp with sweat, eyes shining like wet stones. He raised one finger to his lips, quiet. Instinct overrode paralysis. I ducked under his arm, crashed through the sliding door, and ran into the corridor shouting. Doors opened, passengers peeked out. 2 security officers sprinted toward me. We entered my cabin together, balcony door still open, partition ajar. The next cabin was occupied by an elderly couple unable to walk without canes. No spare room for anyone to hide. We swept the bathroom, closets, and under the bed. Empty. The officer sighed. "I believe you," he said. "But I can't detain a ghost." I spent the rest of the night in an empty infirmary bed with a lock on the inside. At dawn, the ship docked in Miami. Security walked me off first, past cheerful families and port workers, all unaware. At customs, I glanced back up the gangway. Gray Shirt stood at the rail among tourists, waving goodbye, cap back on, eyes fixed only on me. The moment my feet touched the terminal floor, he vanished behind a wall of sun-hatted passengers. I filed a formal report, but follow-up emails said no stowaway was found, no missing crew uniforms, and no unexplained keycard logs. They offered a future cruise credit. I declined. All summer, I checked the news for stories of disappearances at sea. Nothing. Friends say I imagined him, a product of travel nerves. Maybe I did.